Washington Journal continues.
Here at our table, Congressman Jeff Fortenberry is a Republican of Nebraska and appropriator. So, Congressman, let's begin with the story in the Washington Post this week. The president plans to divert additional $7.2 billion in Pentagon funds for the border wall. Congress controls the purse strings. You're on the committee that decides where money should go. Are you concerned about this? Are you okay with the president deciding to divert this money?
Well, first of all, good morning, Greta. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me on the program. This was a topic of discussion as we worked through the appropriation process. There's 12 bills. It takes the bulk of the year. Sometimes it doesn't get done. There's a threat of government shutdown. That didn't happen this year. There was an aggressive effort by Democrats and Republicans to try to find common ground. A part of the earlier discussion was that there was going to be limitations on how the president could potentially use wall funding from other sources. Those were lifted. They were not part of the deliberations, and we moved forward. So there's a court case about this. The court has stopped another court has stopped the injunction. It's going to move forward. Look, listen, border security is important to Americans. There are really four components to trying to have a just and vibrant immigration system. And the first part of that is border security. You cannot have chaos and disorder at your border and then allow for a just and compassionate system to develop like we've traditionally had. There are other components of this that involve interior enforcement and a reworking of our immigration laws so that they are modernized and updated. But when people can come here illegally and when we don't have the resources to be able to handle that, it is unfair to people who are waiting in line and who have used the legal system to try to come here. So as difficult as the situation is on the border, it's actually gotten better. And some type of barrier security has to be an important component of that.
Should the president then have not promised that Mexico would pay for it?
Well, look, I'm here to talk to you about immigration policy or anything else that you want. The reality is that we have a new agreement with Mexico, and this is actually helping reduce the number of border crossings. I was just there last summer during the tsunami when our border patrol was basically overrun by so many people needing help. And I went to see what the realities were, and people were treated humanely. The issue of children being separated from families, children are kept in another place when they are not with a parent, basically. I was there when a 2-month-old baby had to be taken into custody because it may have been smuggled across the border. So this is a difficult situation, and there are problems that are going to occur when you have that many people trying to come over the border, but our customs officials and border patrols are doing the best they can to handle this situation in a humane way and enforce the law. Remember, it is still illegal to come into the country illegally.
Is the situation then so bad that 5 times what Congress authorized for the president to spend is needed in order to do what you're saying on the border? According to the Washington Post, he's prepared to divert additional $7.2 billion, 5 times what Congress authorized him to spend on the project in the 2020 budget.
And this has happened previously. There was some discussion about limitations on that in appropriations, but Democrats and Republicans agreed to lift those restraints on the president's ability to actually move funds like that, because this is about America's security. Remember, a border and the protection of the border is an important part of not only our own internal security, but a humane immigration process, or you will undermine the ability of the country to be charitable in the first place if it is simply overrun. So that's the issue here.
Congressman, the president signed phase 1 of a U.S.-China trade deal yesterday. How have farmers done in your state over the last 2 years? Mm-hmm. How will they do in phase 1 and possibly phase 2?
Farmers in Nebraska have been very patiently awaiting what I have called the reckoning. They understand that America needed to rework the trade deals that we have because they're unfair to us, particularly with China, but also to modernize NAFTA, now the United States-Mexico-Canadian agreement. It actually provided a lot of new opportunities and options to be fair to all 3 countries. And so these were important movements with our neighbors to the north and in the south, and now with China, because we've got a huge trade deficit in the hundreds of billions of dollars, to hit the pause button and say we're going to reset. Trade is an important part of the agricultural economy, but farmers have known that this had to be reckoned with because it's not fair to America. So they've been patient, and I'm frankly very pleased with the developments that have occurred because, again, it gives us an opportunity to do the right thing for the entire country.
What do you want to see in phase two?
Well, they're going to have to continue to deliberate this. Again, the trade agreement is not going to solve all problems immediately. As I recall, we're about a $600 billion trade deficit. Our manufacturing left our shores. Multinational corporations have taken advantage of us by leveraging our infrastructure, leveraging our capital, using our workforce to build up their corporate profiteering, and then shifted their manufacturing overseas. Now, is that fair to America? And they've shifted it overseas to a country which has lax labor laws, which has lax environmental laws, that has subsidized its currency, that subsidizes business directly, and we're just supposed to celebrate free trade as some abstract economic principle? That's not right. Free trade needs to be fair, it needs to be balanced. Both sides have to benefit. So we'll pursue trade, but we have to have the enforcement mechanisms to actually make sure that it is fair.
Now, the Farmers for Free Trade statement say this: we were told Mexico would make massive ag purchases from the United States and that the EU would make huge purchases of U.S. ag products. Neither of those promises were fulfilled. Now we're being told that China will double the level of historic purchases. Needless to say, there is a healthy skepticism about whether American farmers will actually see these purchases. Farmers were told that trade wars are good and easy to win. They were told that they've had to accept short-term pain for long-term gain. The pain has been long-term, and we have yet to see the gain. So when will they see the gain?
Well, through our policies, we've had some adjustment mechanisms that have actually assisted farmers through this difficult period. And that's been helpful. That is public policy decision, both by Republicans and Democrats, to actually provide the assistance while we go through what is a necessary reckoning for the benefit of the entire country. Farmers do benefit from trade, but it is not mere volume of trade. It's actually net revenue to the farmer that actually matters. So in the 21st century, actually, we're going to see some significant developments in the agricultural economy in terms of diversification and marketing of products directly to the consumer. Production agriculture will remain the backbone of agriculture in America, particularly where I come from, because it's one of the last things we produce en masse. But if you look at the net revenue to the farmer, there's going to be huge opportunities for, again, diversification of the farm, as well as enhanced types of products that are marketed directly to the consumer. And these are all exciting developments that sit alongside the opportunities for enhanced trade.
All right, let's get to calls. Dave is in Cincinnati, Ohio, Democratic caller.
Morning, Greta. You look lovely as ever.
Thank you. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you for asking the representative some good questions. I'm going to go right back to it, Representative. Mexico, we were told, was supposed to pay for this wall. When President Trump ran for president, at his rallies, sir, repeatedly he would say, who's going to pay for the wall? Look at me when I talk to you, sir. Don't look down, please. Have a little respect for me. Now, that happened time and time and time again. Are you a fiscal conservative, sir? Can you claim that? Greta also brought up the fact that it's 5 times the amount. 5 times the amount. We're supposed to be in such a wonderful economy, sir, and we're spending, our deficits are $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion. Don't look down, sir. Look at me when I'm talking to you, please.
Dave, he's taking notes.
I'm taking notes about what you're asking, Dave.
Down and
right here.
He acts like I'm not important. I'm talking to you, sir.
Dave, finish your thought. He's taking notes and he's listening.
All right, thank you. But I really would appreciate it if he just look at when I'm talking to him. All right. It's $1 trillion a year, sir, and it's continuing. $1 trillion. Can you really call yourself a fiscal conservative?
Okay, Congressman.
Well, we're meandering all over the place here. Listen, I lived in Ohio for 2 years. I lived in a place where it was decimated by the loss of manufacturing, the steel mill area, where the population of the town that I lived in had lost 20,000 people. It had been cut in half over about a period of 20 years. And so in this aggressive period of expanding trade and globalization, some people were left behind. And it was very important to actually renegotiate trade agreements, particularly for the benefit of manufacturing and the long-term well-being of the agricultural sector, in order to make this fair. So I'm not apologizing for anything like that that's going on here. Yes, we do have very large deficits at the moment. These are due to, again, the baby boom generation is retiring. That means we have obligations, important obligations in Social Security and Medicare to people who have put savings aside, and we're meeting those obligations. This is a tough issue, and it's going to have to be tackled in a bipartisan manner if we're going to actually solve the long-term deficit problem. But the reality is we've got the spending that Congress actually works on every year, other than the automatic spending, is actually at 2010 levels. So we've done a pretty good job of holding down spending, but we have big obligations for those who deserve and actually have earned their future support through Social Security and Medicare by putting aside savings as we require them to do. This has to be solved in a bipartisan way if we're going to move forward, or it becomes too politically vulnerable to either side.
David, Goose Creek, South Carolina, Independent.
Yeah, good morning, Greta. Representative, good morning, and everyone in the country. I think if we saw more people prosecuted that are hiring illegal people that are crossing our border in mass and they're such a threat, that would take it more seriously. But when you just focus on desperate poor people and put them in confined areas because you don't know what else to do, and you can't arrest the corporate CEOs that allow what they allow to happen, I think it kind of takes the wind out of your sails. And I'll listen to your comments and replies. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Congressman.
I'm in complete agreement with you. This problem of exploitation of persons began with big business. And if you start putting a few CEOs in jail, and if the nightly news would show up and watch the CEO being handcuffed and taken out on a raid in a plant, we might have some change of behavior here. Part of immigration reform is not just at the border. In fact, we have to get this off of the 1-yard line at the border. Border security is an essential component. I serve on the subcommittee that actually controls funding for foreign affairs. We've given significant amounts of subsidy to the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador in order to try to get back upstream to create the conditions in which people have economic opportunity, the rule of law, in which criminality and corruption are reduced. We're worried that hasn't worked as well. Some of that, we've been in deliberations with the State Department about that, but it is one of our efforts to actually recreate the conditions in which people can thrive where they are. The second aspect of this is what you're saying, interior enforcement. Remember, it is illegal to enter the United States illegally. It is also illegal to willfully hire someone who is here illegally, and I agree with that. Robust enforcement around that would be a disincentive to exploit poor and vulnerable people. The third aspect of this, though, has to be a modernization of our immigration laws so that people who are in perhaps temporary work-type situation can come and go in an orderly fashion, a more orderly fashion, and we have programs that do that. And then finally, again, it's the foreign policy considerations that get us off just a border debate and move this back upstream so that people are not forced into an economic migration system or fleeing violence.
Derek, New York, Independent. You're on the air with Congressman Fortenberry.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you guys for having me on. Yes, Congressman, I just would like to know your thoughts on where you see, you talk about the farmers in Nebraska, and you look at the recent history with tariffs with China. Where do you forecast that horizon? And I'll wait and listen.
Well, look, the tariff is a blunt force instrument, but the tariff has been used successfully to leverage a negotiation. It's not a perfect negotiation, but we've made progress. Just throwing up our hands and believing in this abstract economic notion of free trade, all that is a subsidy to multinational corporations who will exploit labor and environment for the lowest possible price. You can't have a system that works like that. So yes, the tariff is a blunt instrument, but it actually is a motivating factor. If we can absorb the temporary pain to do the resets on the trade agreements that actually make it fair for both peoples, here as well as overseas.
Congressman, another topic, we're learning that the Senate could vote next week on a resolution limiting the president's use of force in Iran, something that the House did last week. You have a resolution of a proposal for security in northern Iran. Explain that.
In northern Iraq.
Northern Iraq.
Yes. Thank you for raising the question, because this is very important. In 2014, ISIS arose and basically committed genocide against religious minorities, Christians, Yazidis, and certain Muslim minority communities. In the aftermath of that, I, at the behest of the Vice President, traveled to northern Iraq. Some of these beleaguered communities have tried to trickle back to places called Sinjar and the Nineveh Plains. They are part of an ancient tapestry of religious pluralism that once thrived in Iraq. So as a part of moving forward and trying to help Iraq reestablish some type of security, stability, and healthy form of nationalism, I think it's very important that people not remain trapped in refugee camps or be forced to flee overseas, but they actually have a right to return to their ancient homelands. So a simple little measure would be an international training mission that helps integrate religious minorities into the Iraqi security forces, the central government security forces, partnership with Iraq, to actually create the conditions in which they can protect themselves. If we don't do that, there's going to be outward pressure for migration. The Yazidi community, the largest community I represent is in America, is in my district, will probably flee to Europe if they don't have other options. The Christian community will be under continuous pressure to trickle out either to Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, or to Europe or the United States. And you will forever lose that pluralistic character of Iraq, which has been so essential to a previous time in which it was stable and there was well-being. And at its core, this is a fundamental of human justice, of human dignity. The other problem here is you've got militias who have basically taken over large swaths of northern Iraq and create security difficulties.
Who are the militias?
Well,
ISIS
that's not ISIS, no. These are complicated questions that involve Iran. Subsidization by Iran of militias, and it further creates the instability of the northern part there. So this would be a multinational training mission in concert with the Iraqis and the Kurds to actually integrate beleaguered people who were victims of genocide into their security forces. So there is a chance. This is a very simple mechanism to create the stability that's necessary.
How open do you think Iraq is after they've just voted to have U.S. soldiers leave?
Well, we're in a complex moment, clearly. Remember, that was the Shia contingent of the Iraqi parliament in a caretaker government, and the Sunnis and the Kurds weren't there. So there is a mixed set of opinions. There was a reaction to the killing of the Iranian general Soleimani. There is also widespread dependence upon the United States to continue its effort to help the Iraqi security forces create stability, which, by the way, it was the Iraqi security forces who defeated ISIS. But we were right behind them with other international partners, providing logistical support and armament as well as advice. They fought valiantly. That was our effort that consolidated the Iraqis' ability to actually secure their own country. So there's a lot of interdependence here that still exists after this tough and difficult moment. I think that will work itself out. Ultimately, the objective ought to be to leave Iraq, but to leave it stabilized. This component of stabilizing northern Iraq for the religious minority communities is an essential part of that.
Do you think
it actually made it in the appropriations bill?
Okay, so it's signed into law then?
In a one-year budget agreement, yes.
Okay, okay. Is it something that can be done outside of the U.S. Congress and law? Is it something that the administration can negotiate with other countries?
Yes, and that would be the intention.
We'll go to DJ in Hampton, Virginia, independent.
Good morning.
Morning.
First of all, before I ask your guest a question, I would appreciate it if C-SPAN would reprimand or either cut them off. People like that guy that called on that was so rude in all the years. I've watched C-SPAN since it started. I'm 79 years old, and I hate the disrespect I hear from callers. If they want to vent to your neighbors, but don't do it over national TV. I don't care who it is, who the president is. They don't have a right to call in just to trash. Anyway, as to the border wall, yes, I think President Trump should get money wherever he can. We will and are getting it back one way or another through Mexico with the deal. And people fail to look at that. But Congress will never give him money because they don't want him to accomplish anything good That's a fact. I am a true independent. I have voted for Bill Clinton. I voted for Ronald Reagan. I didn't vote at all for Obama or who was running against him because I didn't like either party.
Oh, DJ, you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
The president is doing an excellent job as far as the American people are concerned. I think he's going to win in such a landslide that the Democrats are going to be sorry they ever started anything.
Okay, DJ, Congressman.
Well, first of all, let me thank you, DJ, for your first comments. There is a process going on in our country, if you will, in which we are giving ourselves over to the types of deliberation that are not constructive, that are aggressive, that are mean, that are disrespectful. Social media has created a big part of this, and then frankly the media itself is divided up into base constituency. So you can hear whatever you want to have affirmed by switching the channels, and this is a very big problem. In order for us to have a narrative as a nation, we have to have this space for tolerance and respect, or else this system that you're seeing behind us here will not work. So I'm really grateful for your comments there. I refuse to believe that we can't have civil reasoned discourse even when there may be a disagreement. That's the Nebraska way. I think it ought to be the American way. So I really appreciate your earlier comments. Look, regarding the border wall, we've covered this significantly. It is about our national security. It is about trying to protect ourselves from criminality, from an incapacity to absorb large numbers of people, and also to create a vibrant and just and orderly and compassionate immigration system when there is a real need according to the law. That's how this works.
Greensboro, Maryland. Gabriel, Republican.
Hello, yes, thanks for having me, and thank you, sir, for being a public servant to our country. I just want to say a couple of things. So first thing I want to say is about the wars in the Middle East. I have to say that I just have to ask if you can answer this question. Why are we over there to begin with? From the very beginning, why did we, our country, United States, invade Iraq? And I personally believe that it was a false pretense. I believe that the president was President Bush. I think he was misled. That's the first thing I want to say. So I don't think we should be. I don't think we should even be over there to begin with. I have friends who are Marines and who have served as well. But also, the second thing I want to say is we have to get to. Second thing I want to say is you do a good job, sir. But like the average American person is just really exhausted with politicians in general, and it's just like everything is just like the flip flop. It's just. It's hard to keep track of what these politicians are saying because one day they say one thing, next day they say another. They're inconsistent. They just say whatever they're kind of paid to say at the moment. It's very exhausting. Last thing, is that we have to figure out as a country who assassinated Kennedy, and who assassinated Martin Luther King. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, Gabriel, let me say a couple things. First of all, thank you for thanking me for public service. I have always believed that public service is a noble aspiration. I have a family. I live in Nebraska. I still live there. I left business opportunities to come do this. This was my choice because I believe in our country, and I felt the call in my heart to aspire to serve in this way. But look, it's a tough, difficult job. I agree with you. People are exhausted by the meandering, the lurching back and forth, by the daily drama of politics. One solution is to just, Greta won't like this, but just turn all this off and be quiet and contemplative and reflective and be in dialogue in your community where you live, what we call a place-based strategy, to be interdependent with your neighbors, working out any differences in a reasoned fashion. Politics is downstream from the culture. And what do I mean by that? Well, what you're seeing reflected in Washington is reflected across the country. This division up into tribal allegiance, and it's not healthy and it's exhausting. But I assure you, we're not being paid other than the salary that you see for doing this work. And there's a lot of good people up here. You'd be shocked by the level of personal dialogue, personal friendship between Republicans and Democrats. which is rarely seen. However, I get it. What you see on the TV is somebody calling somebody else their dear friend and then tearing them to shreds. How do people live like that? It's called dualism, and it's an odd thing up here. We probably ought to do better with that and set a better example. But if we can reestablish our sense of a nation and carry ourselves forward with dignity, actually the world is also yearning for that. Regarding the Middle East, I think the long-term strategy ought to be exactly what you say, to remove ourselves, to extricate ourselves from there. I wasn't in Congress when the decision was made to go to war in Iraq, but as you recall, there were multiple UN resolutions about weapons of mass destruction. If the international community is actually going to be able to enforce against bad behavior, Saddam Hussein was a horrific dictator and was threatening the use of weapons of mass destruction or the development of them. There's questionable intelligence about that, and later that was proven true. And it has cost us dearly in lives and in your money to be over there. But to exit this with a healthy nationalism in Iraq, with stability for our friends and allies, which include the Jordanians, the Lebanese, the Israelis, the Egyptians, and many others, ought to be the goal as quick as possible. But it does depend upon stabilization.
White Plains, New York. Mike, a Democratic caller.
Me?
Mike, yes.
Am I on the line?
You are, for the Congressman. Go ahead. Question or comment?
Okay. What is my comment? My comment is that we had no business invading Iraq. We should have left them alone. Our trade agreements were working. Britain has learned a valuable lesson. If it's not broke, you don't fix it.
Okay. All right, Mike, we're running out of time, so I'll have the Congressman respond.
When there's close to a $600 billion trade deficit with China, it's not working. That needed to be reckoned with. It's out of balance. China's system is not our system. They subsidize their industries. They pollute their environment. They have lax labor standards. We have all those things built into our economy in order to protect persons because we believe economic output, making things, ought to be both, yes, for profit, for the well-being of community, but the well-being of individuals. So you have to have systems that are operating fairly and enforcement mechanisms to catch cheating. So I'm frankly grateful to President Trump that he took this on when nobody else would. Now, again, this is only a first step. It's not going to solve everything, but at least it's a step to send a message that the United States will not be taken advantage of any longer.
Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, Republican of Nebraska, we appreciate the conversation this morning. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Greta. Thank you.
We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk by Wisconsin Democrat Gwen Moore about her state's role in being a key one at that in campaign 2020. We'll be right back.